This is how I learned to play around the fretboard. Basically, it's about connecting different shapes from one part of the fretboard to another part. And you do that by memorizing over time uh, certain shapes that go from the low E string to the high E string. And there are basically two scales that you have to work on during this time. The first is the pentatonic scale, which is uh, in the, let's say, in the key of C major, A minor. It's A, C, D, E, G, A. And then the next one is, well, it's called the diatonic scale or something, but it's easier just to say major minor. And that is, well, starting from A minor, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. Then you go up the fretboard playing those same notes. So what you want to be able to do is play the notes of those scales all around the fretboard. And so all you have to do is figure out where in the fretboard are those notes. Let's say, well, we're gonna start off doing the pentatonic scale, and that begins with a low E here. And then this is the next shape that you have to get familiar with. And then the next shape is what I was doing earlier. Then the next one is here. Next. And then when you move up here, it's already an octave higher than what I was playing earlier, so it's the same shape but just an octave higher. And then here, which is pretty much the same as this. Next is the major minor. And since we're playing in the key of C major, all the notes we'll be playing will be natural notes. That is, they're not sharps or flats. So we start off here in the low E again. Yeah, so that's along with some open strings if you noticed. Then the next shape would be the next. And then we're an octave higher again. And then, yeah, you just keep doing that all the way as far as you can go here. And so what you want to be able to do is be able to connect all of those different shapes that I showed you all together, or at least, yeah, you'll be able to link them one by one when you're playing around the fretboard. Let's see. So let's say I'm starting here in the earlier shape where I started. Well, it's very rare that piece of music will actually have someone doing that, like it's very, in a very academic way. normally if you're gonna go up or down the scale, you're gonna sort of go back one and then go forward several notes, like, and you're not gonna do it in just one shape. You're gonna learn to move around the fretboard some more, like, one of the biggest tools that you can use is to realize that you're playing the same thing an octave higher when you shift a note 2 frets higher and 2 strings higher. And this holds until you reach the B string, because anything past the B string, if you're going to play an octave higher on the B string, it will be 3 frets higher and still 2 strings higher. So, for example, this note, it's an A on the 5th fret. So you go up to the 7th fret and 2 strings higher, which is the D string, and it's another A. And if you want to go up an octave higher, you notice that the note is on a B string. So you know to go up 3 frets and then 2 strings higher. Well, it might help to actually think of the string first and then the frets. Like this on the D string, an A on the D string on the 7th fret, and then you move up 2 strings, and then you realize that it has to be 3 frets higher. And it's not just the single notes that you realize move up in that way. You also realize that certain shapes move that way. So let's say we're doing this sequence of notes A, C, D, E. And then you want to move it an octave higher. So it means moving up the fretboard 2 frets, 2 strings and 2 frets higher. So you're playing exactly the same thing, 2 frets and 2 strings higher. And I knew to move up 3 frets and 2 strings higher because it's on the B string. Why does the B string have this magical significance? Well, if you notice when you're tuning the guitar, the B string is only a major third higher than the previous string, as opposed to a 4th higher as with the other strings. So just mathematically, you realize that you have to move up an extra fret in order to hit the same note. Oh, sometimes you're going to be playing a shape, let's say here. And that's an E, G, A, C. And you're going to move it up an octave higher. So that means you move it up 2 strings and 2 frets. But you can't play the same shape. 7-10, 7-10. No, because the other string, you realize an octave higher, the notes are on the B string. So you can't just play. You can't play it like this. It sounds so wrong, right? You have to adjust the one string to be a fret higher. So that's the 7th fret, 10th fret, 7th fret, 10th fret. But if you're gonna move it up an octave higher, it's 9th fret, 12th fret, 10th fret, 13th fret. once you realize that octaves are related in this way on the guitar, it's much easier to move around as needed. And you might realize that sometimes it's easier to move the shape that you're playing as opposed to just staying within the shape. Like let's say I was showing earlier, let's say from C. Sometimes you might realize that it's actually easier to just play. You see this note? This note isn't part of the shape earlier because it was played here on the G string as opposed to the B string. So the more familiar you are with the different fretboard shapes, the more you could mix it up, and it will be easier for you to move from one point to another. And so I'll be demonstrating what it's like to be able to move around the fretboard, doing both the pentatonic and the major minor scales. And so you notice that I'm moving like it's almost like it's like I'm playing something here in the B and E strings, and then I move down a few frets down and I'm playing on the G and D strings, and then I'm moving down yet some more on the fretboard and playing on the A and E and low E string. And so you can kind of see why it's important to recognize the octaves when you're playing. And it really helps to be able to use a slide technique when you're going around. Yeah, all of that comes in time. You just have to do it again and again. Think of it. I mean, if you're really into learning the fretboard, you're probably going to be thinking about the fretboard, even like when you're watching TV or doing something else. I mean, the shapes are just going to come to you, and that in itself is going to help you get familiar with the different shapes as needed to play around the fretboard. And you'll also realize that learning the fretboard goes hand in hand with ear training. So the better you are at figuring out what notes you hear and what you want to play just by thinking of them, the easier it will be for you to play around the fretboard and translate your thoughts, your musical ideas into the guitar framework.